Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into something, well, incredibly common. That feeling of being stuck in our heads, overthinking,
Hmm.
and how it connects to modern anxiety. We've got some really interesting stuff here, looking at both psychological research, but also our evolutionary history.
It's a fascinating link.
Yeah, so our mission today is pretty straightforward. Is this tendency to overthink just a sign of our times? Or does it maybe run, much deeper? Could our brain's knack for dwelling on negative thoughts actually be like an evolutionary leftover?
It's a really compelling question. And when we talk about that kind of persistent overthinking, psychology often uses the term rumination.
Rumination. Right.
And it's not just like thinking a lot, it's more this repetitive,
Mm.
almost looping focus on why we're upset, what caused it, the
Getting
implication.
stuck.
Exactly, getting stuck. And interestingly, even though you might feel like you're actively trying to solve something, rumination is actually considered quite passive.
Hmm. Passive. How so?
Well, it's different from actively worrying about the future, or just those fleeting negative thoughts we all get. Rumination is more like replaying a broken record of distress without
Yeah.
necessarily moving towards a solution.
Okay.
And there are different flavors, but the one called brooding, which is very self-critical, inward-looking, that one's particularly linked to things like depression and anxiety.
Ah, I see.
And this isn't just a small thing. Rumination is seen as a pretty significant risk factor, a key process across various mental health conditions. It impacts mood, sure, but also our ability to solve problems, our behavior, even our physical health.
Wow, okay. So let's rewind then, way back. How does our evolutionary past shed some light on this?
Well, evolutionary psychology basically suggests our minds evolved through natural selection, just like our bodies did.
Survival of the fittest, but for thoughts.
Sort of, yeah. Traits or ways of thinking that helped our ancestors survive and, crucially, reproduce got passed down.
Hmm.
Our brains developed these specific cognitive tools to deal with the challenges of their world. And a huge part of that world was social dynamics.
Right. Living in groups, cooperation, competition.
Exactly. So thinking repeatedly about social events might have deep roots there.
And this ancestral world, the EEA, environment of evolutionary adaptedness, that's key here, isn't it?
It really is. The idea is that our minds are fundamentally adapted to that ancient hunter-gatherer life, not necessarily modern life with all its complexities.
Which sets up this potential mismatch.
Precisely. An evolutionary mismatch.
So could this tendency to ruminate, could it actually have been useful, maybe even adaptive for our ancestors?
Well, that's the hypothesis. It's possible that the underlying cognitive processes did have benefits back then.
Like what?
Imagine needing to constantly scan for threats or really analyze why a hunt failed or figure out tricky social situations to, maintain alliances or status.
Okay. That kind of persistent focus, even if negative, might have been crucial for learning, planning, and just plain survival.
So that feeling we get sometimes that we should keep thinking about a problem.
That could be an echo, yeah. An echo of a time when that focused analysis often did lead to concrete benefits in a world that moved, frankly, a lot slower.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. How does this potentially helpful tendency go wrong? Why is it often so unhelpful for us now?
Because our environment is just so radically different. The nature of our stressors has changed.
How so?
Ancestral threats were often immediate, physical. A predator, a rival tribe, starvation. You dealt with it or you didn't. Now, we face these chronic, often abstract, psychological stressors.
Like work pressure, financial worries.
Exactly. Or think about the sheer volume of information, social comparison on social media. It's constant fuel for those rumination cycles.
Yeah.
Things that often don't have a clear, single solution you can just implement.
Right. You can't just solve climate change anxiety by thinking about it more.
Precisely. So our brains, kind of wired to analyze tangible problems within a small group context, get overwhelmed. They spin their wheels on problems they weren't really designed for. It's that clash, the mismatch between the old wiring and the new world.
Okay, so on a practical day-to-day level, how does this rumination actually drive anxiety? What's it doing?
Well, several things. It keeps negative emotions going for much longer than they otherwise might. It tends to heighten our perception of threat. We see danger everywhere.
Makes sense.
It also impairs our ability to actually cope effectively and find solutions because we're stuck in the why me phase. And it often reinforces avoidance. You avoid things that trigger the rumination, which just feeds the anxiety long term.
And cognitively, what's happening inside the head?
Key things seem to be difficulty disengaging attention from the negative thoughts. It's like our mental off switch is faulty. Working memory gets clogged with negativity, making it hard to think clearly about other things. We develop biases, constantly scanning for the negative.
And sometimes we even think ruminating is helping.
Yeah, there can be metacognitive beliefs like, I need to think this through to understand it, which kicks it off. Or negative beliefs like, worrying about my worrying is uncontrollable, which adds another layer of anxiety. That difficulty disengaging seems really crucial in today's world with endless potential triggers.
And I guess there's a physical side too, stress hormones and all that.
Oh, absolutely. Chronic rumination keeps the body's stress response system activated through cortisol release. Brain imaging studies often show heightened activity in areas like the amygdala, involved in emotion and threat, and also brain regions involved in self-focus and control, like parts of the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, so pulling this all together then, this deep dive suggests that our tendency to overthink, to ruminate, it might not be some kind of modern defect in us.
Or believe it or not, no.
It's more like an evolutionary mismatch, a mental tool that maybe had a real purpose once, but it kind of misfires in the context of our very different modern world.
That's a really good way to put it. Modern anxiety, in many cases, likely emerges from this interplay, this friction between our evolved predispositions and the environment we actually live in now.
Right. So a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Maybe thinking about this changes things slightly. That tendency to get lost in thought, maybe it isn't entirely a personal failing. Could understanding these deeper evolutionary roots shift how you relate to your own overthinking? Perhaps it's less of a flaw and more of a relic. A mind designed for a world that doesn't quite exist anymore, exploring evolutionary psychology, and maybe looking into ways to build that cognitive control, that ability to disengage. That could be really interesting. Thanks for diving deep with us today.